Welcome, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here today moderating this online panel on the Blockchain Services Network. We have three scholars from around the world, specifically in Asia: Michael Sung in Shanghai, David Lee in Singapore, and Wei Shen in Hong Kong. And we're talking about the blockchain-based services network. The BSN is a platform for blockchain development. It brings together cloud services and different chain protocols, and it makes it really easy for developers to design and deploy decentralized applications. Most importantly, it hopes to power cross-chain communication, so helping decentralized applications based on different protocols sort of communicate and be interoperable with each other. And it is already available in many countries around the world, especially in China. And the BSN architects worked with local cloud providers to create a global internet of blockchains. It is part of the Chinese government's global blockchain strategy unveiled by Chinese President Xi Jinping in November 2019. And it is spearheaded by the China State Information Center, China Mobile, China UnionPay, and the main architects is a Beijing-based company called Red Date Technology. So it's a very ambitious project, and we are very happy to have here today three scholars to talk about them. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time. Would you please briefly introduce yourselves and tell us about your work in blockchain, and also what is your relation to the BSN? David, perhaps you would like to start.
First of all, I'd like to thank BSN for inviting me here. And I'm so happy to be here with Mike and Wei Shen and Eliza. I started researching on Bitcoin back in 2013, 2014, because I saw that it was a new technology that can change the entire world. I've been in the financial industry for over 20 years prior to that, and managing funds and sitting on boards and and listed companies as well. But I've never seen anything as disruptive as Bitcoin. And from there onwards, I've been watching a lot of development. And from my research, I suppose the most interesting thing about blockchain is about the relationship among the nodes. And that's a key thing, because it's not only just P2P communication, which exchange information, is P2P ledger that can actually record anything that that is of value. And having said that, it just means that it needs to be as inclusive as possible. So inclusive fintech was what I was researching and looking at technology that can be as inclusive as it can be. And when I first saw BSN announcing that what they are doing, having every blockchain as a node in the entire the ecosystem, that caught my attention, and I just feel that this is one project that I need to follow closely. And this is one of the most promising projects that I've been looking at since 2013.
Thank you, David. And what about you, Michael? What is your blockchain-related experience and your experience with the BSN?
So I'm the co-director of the Fudan Fanhai FinTech Research Center. We do a lot of applied research trying to take these new, innovation related to digital assets, to blockchain, and then try to marry that innovation with traditional finance. Fudan University is actually one of the top universities in the country with respect to traditional finance, and Fanhai International School of Finance is really focused on that, and specifically being a connector to the international ecosystem. So we're trying to take the best practices, the innovation coming from areas like Singapore, where David is, Switzerland, etc., and taking a world lead in regulating digital assets and applying that thought leadership to the greater China context. So we're working on a lot of things related to digital assetization, like asset-backed securitization in the modern digital form, tokenization, crypto economics, etc. So I'm actually quite applied in the sense that this is not just academic research, but it's to apply these techniques into use cases which can scale into the finance industry. And then I'm also the chairman of Carbonblue Innovations, which is a venture building investment platform to take fintech, blockchain, and digital finance innovation and to scale that into the developing world. So I advise at this point a number of governments on their digital strategy, specifically in developing capital markets, things like digitizing their green sovereign bonds, to perhaps issuing their own what we call central bank digital currency, and also to apply these new digital finance technologies to develop the digital economies in these different parts of the world, which is actually quite relevant, specifically post-COVID, where a lot of these countries are struggling. A lot of SMEs don't have the access to credit. And so I think digital finance and fintech become enabling tools to really make impact in the world.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for being here. And Wei Shen, what about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm Wei Shen Lo. I'm a partner of a venture firm called BL Capital, BSN. So we are angel fund, and we have been operating in the last 7 years and have been investing into roughly 70-something projects in China, Hong Kong, and Silicon Valley. Majority of our investment are in China, with usually from $500,000 to $1 million US, equivalent of RMB. We are particularly keen on disruptive technologies. So from very early time, we have started to be, about 5 years ago, we started to be investing in blockchain projects. So that's one example is Ubi in Beijing, which is doing trade finance. We have invested a number of them in Beijing and Qingdao and a number of different places in China. In Hong Kong, we have an investment called Crypto Block, which is they are the technology partner for a bigger consortium called Contour, which is right now 40 banks trying to work together to do trade finance globally and using the Quarter technology. So we invest in blockchain quite early on, and we also invest in AI. And to me, AI and blockchain are the two fundamental building blocks of fintech. So we are very much interested in fintech, although the application could be in other areas, but fintech is one of my major interests. And so we have a long history for that. And last 2 years, I've been particularly interested in the security token space and also in digital securities and in regulation technology in Hong Kong as a hub for fintech, and how Hong Kong can leverage all this latest technology to strengthen the role of a financial center. And recently, Hong Kong government, the regulator, have launched a number of different frameworks, including there'll be a license for virtual exchange, which I think could be quite significant. So that's my interest. And I'm also working with BSN to explore launching a portal in Hong Kong, and we have a very much deep relationship in Hong Kong with all the ecosystem players, including Cyberport, S3, Science Park, Invest Hong Kong, and we know a lot of fintech students in all the universities. So we think we can build a very interesting ecosystem in Hong Kong, working with BSN and try to get a lot of developers to develop innovative application on top of it. So that's my background and relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Shen. And so, yeah, let's kick things off. Thanks, everyone, for being here. So my first question is, why is the BSN important? Why are we here talking about it? There's already several protocols and platforms for developing decentralized applications like Fabric, Fisco, and so on. So what makes the BSN stand out of all of these? David, perhaps you would like to answer this question?
Yeah, okay. The two things, maybe I use the acronym. The first one is LASIK, and certainly BSN is low margin, asset light, scalable, innovative, and compliance easy. I call it LASIK. And the other one is I would call it A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and Q. Basically, what it means is just convergence of technology. BSN is a very important digital infrastructure, not only in China, but the rest of the world for A, which is combination of AI, blockchain, cloud, and cybersecurity. And then D is digital devices, E is environmental friendly technology, F is financial inclusion, G is communication, and Q is quantum computing. So you do need to have a very good digital infrastructure to have all this coming into the picture. And I think the reason why I'm very interested is that the philosophy of BSN is very inclusive, right? At the end of the day, where we were looking at the technology, we were looking into trying to make everyone as a bank and everyone as an exchange. But if you have to link up with everything else, whether it's satellite, whether it's communication, whether it's your IoT, you need to have the base layer digital infrastructure for your smart cities, even in remote areas. So that is where I think the combination of private consortium and open blockchain or public blockchain is key to getting the world in getting all those people who are excluded and all those products which are excluded at this moment back to the financial economic system.
Mm-hmm.
May I add a short comment? I think the way that I understand it is BSN is course portal, course cloud, and course framework. What I mean by course framework is actually it would have a number of permission and also a number of permissionless blockchain linking to the infrastructure. So when this infrastructure will be eventually building up in its full scale, I think they want to basically encourage everyone in the world to link up to it. So it's forming a mega framework for blockchain infrastructure. And with the vision to lower the cost of development on either one of these framework, like Fabric, or even combining Fabric with some other either public or private chains, it will be much easier to do this way if everyone is already linked up. So the infrastructure is still there, and then developers don't need to worry about that. They just go into the portal to choose whatever cloud, whatever framework they want to use, and whatever node, and they can quickly and cheaply deploy. I think that would nourish a lot of innovation coming from blockchain, and that's, I think, the fundamental difference between BSN and any one of these particular frameworks.
Thank you, Wei Shen. And just to sort of zoom out a little bit, as I mentioned in my introduction, the BSN is spearheaded by the Chinese government, and it aims to be the world's blockchain infrastructure. We can discuss how or whether that will happen. But zooming out, why do you think China is so keen on blockchain technology? Michael, you're in Shanghai. Maybe you want to take this question.
Sure. I think if you actually looked at what's happened post-COVID, China has really decided that they need to really develop what we call new infrastructure, right? And they've actually put in as a new stimulus form something on the order of 750 billion yuan, RMB, in the development of this. Now that's tantamount to infrastructure, to developing essentially smart cities infrastructure, right? So you have 5G, you have automation, you have new digital commerce, and all this kind of activity is happening on more and more will be happening on blockchain systems, right? But the problem is that these blockchain systems don't talk to each other, right? So you have Ant Financial with its Ant chain, you got Ping An with their chain, you got Baidu with their chain. and they're not really interoperable, right? And so if you want to, vertically integrate the cloud computing, if you want to sit the big data and AI systems on top so that you can actually do useful inferences across data, across these systems, it's very difficult to do right now. So, therefore, blockchain, and specifically the BSN, becomes a sort of unifying infrastructure of infrastructures that can allow you to take Taobao records off of Ant Financial chain and WeChat Pay records off of Tencent's chain, et cetera, and combine it to do the big data thing, right? So I think that's probably why BSN actually is getting this sort of traction that it is, because it's kind of like in the original internet, right? In the very beginning in the 90s, all these private intranets existed, right? Each company didn't really trust the wild west of the internet, and so they had their all little walled gardens. It was really only when these walled gardens started to talk to each other, to interoperate, right? You can get payment data here to e-commerce data on eBay, like, for example. When that stuff started connecting, then you can do useful e-commerce and all sorts of innovation occurred, right? So the same thing is now happening in the blockchain space, right? We have this balkanized ecosystem. It's very difficult to talk across chains, and you actually need huge engineering teams and effort to develop it. But when they start to interconnect, and then also you lower the bar for developers to develop on it, in the extreme case, it'll be like a Shopify, kind of click a couple buttons, and you can provision your cloud resources, you can provision your cross-border payments and whatever, and it's all very easy for the layman to do. That's when it's really going to drive a mass adoption of the digital economy as well as enterprise blockchain. And I think BSN will be a major catalyst for that worldwide, because it's happening for sure in China, because China can, has the ability to push this into its ecosystem, from city governments to state-owned enterprise to the private sector. And because China is usually the largest trade partner for most of the world, that will have a sort of a catalyst moment internationally as well to connect that ecosystem to the same infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. So you think the government wants to use blockchain to unify all these other technologies that exist right now, like AI, like big data, and create this, as you call it, underlying infrastructure. Any other takes on this, guys?
I think it's not only China who's keen on blockchain technology. We look at ADB, everyone is talking about accelerating digital infrastructure, and blockchain is extremely important, whether it's sovereign ID, whether it's sort of health, for traveling, blockchain-based ID and payments, remittances are all very important. It just happened that China is the first country that democratized communication. I mean, where else could you get a telephone number and a line with 8 renminbi, which is $1, per month? So I think China has certainly done very well in communication, but not the rest of the world. And the second stage is obviously blockchain technology, because we are into an era of distribution economics, because we now have to distribute wealth. We now have to have a lot of imbalances. So it's obviously that everyone in Asia or everyone in the world is trying to find technology that can even out the inequality. And I don't see it as an initiative by the Chinese government, more like a facilitator, right, for the entire region to grow together. And because it just happens that China has 1.4 billion people, so clearly it's the best fire starter that you can have. And in terms of interoperability, it's important. Somebody has to think about that. There are many people who are doing the standards. They try to have the standards on smart contracts and everything else that comes along, but that's not easy unless you have a huge base and also connected by communication, that you could actually have a leading role in setting the standards. So it's just natural that China will be the best facilitator for a global blockchain infrastructure. So every country will have their own digital infrastructure based on blockchain, but eventually all these blockchains have to talk to each other. The interoperability will have to come from somewhere, and I think BSN is in the right direction.
My take
Yes.
on this one is, first of all, I think China have realized blockchain is going to be a fundamental technology for the next maybe 20 years, right? Either this will the blockchain network and the internet will probably kind of combine and bundle together and evolve in the next generation network. And so therefore it's paying a lot of emphasis on this technology. And we are still in the early stage of the blockchain development, like the early stage of the internet. We are, if you compare with the internet, we are not that far after email, basically, right? Maybe even not even the browser have came out, right? So a lot of innovation is awaiting us in the future. So China want to maybe take a lead in this time to leverage the huge market size, right? Because there's so many domestic user and use this chance to kind of take a lead to build out and work with all others public or private blockchain in the world, and take a lead on that. Maybe can enjoy some more innovations and stimulate some more digital economy. I think that is fitting with the Chinese government overall technology development plan. And one more thing is the Belt and Road Initiative is another big initiative from China government. So if this BSN, if they go out global, can supplement the Belt and Road, I think that will be even better, right? So there are a number of different angles that I think the Chinese government will very much want to push this ahead.
Mm-hmm. So these are all reasons why China wants the BSN to succeed internationally, but right now we are at a point in the world where a lot of countries don't have very favorable views of China. Actually, there's some research that suggests that globally people's opinions of China is very low, the lowest it has been in a very long time. And so my question to you is, how do you think other countries and other governments will take to the idea of a China-made Internet of Blockchain and of China bringing in this infrastructure to their own countries? Wei Shen, you were just talking about the BRI, so maybe you can give us an answer on that, specifically about BRI countries versus other countries like, say, Australia, for example.
Well, I think, okay, first of all, what Chinese propose about this BSN is linking a lot of different technology, and quite a lot of them are not from China, right? Some of the permissionless chain like EOS and Algorand, these are from US, right? So if you look at the BSN cost portal, cost chain, cost framework, cost data center approach, is actually majority of the technology or majority are not China make. There's of course a few China make things here, but I think this is quite neutral because it's not only promoting the Chinese chain, actually want to make different chain work together. So from that point of view, I think it's quite neutral in terms of technology. And I mean, and if any country want to promote the blockchain industry, this is a very good and low cost infrastructure, and they can encourage their developer to develop on top of it. And when top of it, meaning maybe on top of some other East Western technology, not necessarily building on Chinese technology, right? So from this point of view, I think it's quite neutral.
I like to comment on this as well, because I think the media has, of course, has a nice angle on, you know, this being Chinese infrastructure and, you know, kind of pushing sort of geopolitical button along the same lines as, say, Huawei infrastructure for 5G. But I think it's quite differentiated, right? Wei Shen actually hit it on the head, which is to say that China is not trying to promote their own, you know, permission blockchain where Xi Jinping has a key and can look at all the transactions across. That's not what the BSN is. The BSN is an interoperability protocol, which the same way, if people are familiar with Cosmos or Polkadot, where it connects between different blockchains. And so all the typical encryption standards and things are in place. So actually the BSN does not have any sort of ability to look at private user data. Those are controlled by portals. Wei Shen mentioned one setting up in Hong Kong, which will be controlled by local operators, right? Compliant with local data privacy, GDPR type rules, and things like that, right? Only when there is a need to actually go across blockchains, data transfer that would occur through the BSN protocol, but that's encrypted by standard systems, so that it is not able to be snooped on by anyone, right? So that's point number one. And as an interoperability standard, therefore, as Wei Shen mentioned, it really isn't about China infrastructure. It's about connecting different ecosystems, of which China has a component with all the permission blockchains on the mainland, but with also this sort of heterogeneous ecosystem internationally with public chains and Ethereum and things like this, right? And BSN will therefore serve a very important bridge between that, say, the international world into the China ecosystem. In fact, they just announced something called the Open Permission Network, which allows you to take, say, an Ethereum public blockchain and make it compliance to mainland regulation and allow that interactivity to occur. So insofar as the rest of the world wants to, interact and partake in, a very large piece of the global economy, that's very important to note. And then I think another very important thing to note is actually, if you look at the news, the BSN recently, the governance, right, the supervision on the mainland, has recently decided to split the governance of the BSN into two components. The mainland piece, which is still governed by the 4 founding partners and headed by the State Information Center. But the international piece, they have given the rights actually to Red Day Technology as a private company. And that, and also the intent is to set up a independent BSN International Foundation. And in that foundation, the understanding is that they want to create basically a global interoperability, standard and framework, and they invite participation from, the Western parties, so trying to get very large Western tech companies involved. My understanding is that they plan on eventually to open source that code and make it into an international standard with the right privacy, with the right trust systems, with the right security, with the right scale and standards, such that the world can partake in that. And I think that is probably a universally positive thing to allow interconnectivity, because it's such a fundamental piece of driving the global economy these days.
Yeah. I just want to add on to say that, there are two points to this. First is that, the design behind blockchain is important, and usually untrusted parties can work together. That's the first thing. And what's even more interesting here is that we are trying to have all different blockchains which are having their own trade-offs and own advantages to link up together. And on top of that, you will see a lot of smart contracts and so on, so that you actually reduce the cost of trust. So whether it's in trade, finance, or whether it's in international trade, whether it's supply chain, in the whole of the Belt and Road Initiative, you really need to have digital infrastructure. So there is a need of this type of interoperable open blockchain environment outside China. And I understand within China, the private blockchain has also two types. One that is very particular to their own cryptography needs, and the other type which not really is international type of private blockchain that we are all used to. So I think there's quite a lot of design thinking that's ongoing. There's more a design thinking issue to allay the worries, whether it's from the on-chain design or the off-chain governance design that one has to put more thoughts into, and you just need someone to take that lead to drive that. And the group that drive this, they not only have to just, in theory, or just trying to set a standard, they must have enough trades, enough businesses, enough commercial interest behind that people will jump on the bandwagon. And for China to come out and invest outside China, clearly blockchain will be best thing to track all their payments and so on. Otherwise, it's risky. So it can reduce risk and also reduce the cost of trust as we go on to international trade. And I'm sure later we'll talk more about the payment system as well. Yeah. Eliza, you are muted.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Okay, thank you guys. So from what I understand, in your view, the design of the BSN so far is such that all the sort of Chinese government scary boogeyman are not applicable, or perhaps will not be applicable down the line if the design is implemented in the way that it is intended to. Is that correct?
I have immediate response to you is that I'm more wary about digital empire, because in a centralized digital economy, you will find a situation where winner takes all, and in the gig economy, a lot of people are excluded, and that is and our privacy of data is not actually being protected. But in the case of blockchain, it's up to you to design, and I think TEE, whether you could use many of whether zero knowledge proof, multi-party computing, everything else that BSN is talking about. Those are the ones that's really empowering the individual. And that's why I already talked about distribution economics. Not only that we're using the blockchain to distribute wealth, not only we're using the blockchain to distribute capital cheaply to the people who needs it, we are also distributing the data sovereignty back to the individual. And whether you like it or not, whether it's a Chinese government initiative or BSN, but I think the world is, and the governments and the international organizations are more worried about a centralized digital economy than a decentralized digital economy, which is a token economy.
Another angle I would like to point out is China's worry about this permissionless chain. There's a reason. Because usually they are associated with tokens or coin, and with the ICO demonstrated, lots of bad people, right? They leverage this opportunity and they can use it to raise a lot of people from the general public, and this affects the financial stability, and therefore the permissionless chain will block in China, together with ICO and all this stuff. If you look at the BSN design, actually, you can argue that it's now opening up the Chinese market for some of these permissionless chain, and asking them to follow the Chinese law, and asking them to not to use the token, but still the technology and the functionality can be preserved and used in China in a little bit controlled way. Now, this is compared to completely blocking them, I think is a progress, to allow them to be in China, to be used by Chinese citizens, and doing a lot of applications, right? Now, if this continue to grow, and if the regulation technologies continue to develop and easing some of the concern for the Chinese government, maybe more flexibility will be more allowed in the future for these foreign public chains to get in China. So it's not only launching an infrastructure globally, but it's also opening up Chinese citizens to expose to some of this latest technology from the world. So it's both ways. It's bi-direction, not just one way.
So this is you're referring to the open permissioned program within the BSN. Can someone maybe explain the difference between permissioned and permissionless chains real quick?
Yeah, perhaps the easiest way to explain this is whether it's gated or not. If it's gated by an administrator that who can come into the blockchain as a node, that will be the one sentence explanation of that. Of course, the technical explanation. But I just want to raise one point is to say that I'm not saying that there's no challenges for any of this, what BSN is trying to do. There are a lot of other issues that we need to work together to resolve. For example, if a public blockchain has got fork, and then we have our digital assets on there and so on, the governance side is important, who is responsible and so on. So there are a lot of challenges for BSN as well in many issues that things that can go wrong when there's interoperability, and mainly they are all off-chain governance issue about asset ownership, property rights, and regulation and so on, which I think is, to me, is more important to encourage everyone to come together to try to solve these important issues rather than worrying about who is the fire starter and so on. But I think those are the important issues that we really need to think carefully, because those are the one that can really ensure that this trust system will be lost if you cannot address simple issue like if there's a fault, what happened, who owns the assets, and how do we trace back in this, if there's interoperability, how do we deal with all those issues?
Thank you, David. I want to follow up a little. We've touched on a lot of things during this one question. I want to follow up with Michael, because he was talking about standards and encryption. And there was a new encryption law in China that, to the eyes of many foreign observers, means that any encrypted technology within China will have to sort of give the keys to the Chinese government. So how do you think the BSN's possible standard setting, Michael, across the world will affect these encryption technologies? And is it possible for the global version of the BSN to be backdoored in such a way? So even if everything is encrypted, they give a key to the Chinese government.
Yeah, actually, if you understand the architecture of how the BSN works, that is actually not possible, because actually at no period of time does sort of private information actually go through the hands of the people who operate the BSN. Which again, it's the way that the BSN works is, if you want to provision resources, i.e. you want to access cloud resources for AWS, which is a partner, or you want to create your own distributed app, right? Or you want to use a blockchain as a service, from the network that somebody else has designed and deployed. You have to go through a portal, and those portals internationally, the strategy is to be operated by local partners, right? So if you go into Hong Kong, it could be Shaun and his team operating that portal. So it's actually not the BSN or the Chinese government actually operating the portal or the data center, etc. Okay, those are local operators with local people who are not Chinese who operate that, right? And so customer data, right, and all the details of what's happening is not even seen by anyone, by Red Date or anyone else that's maintaining the interoperability. That's number one. The second is actually, in many ways, if you look into the details, BSN's arguably more secure than any one blockchain, because if you're on Ethereum or you're on Hyperledger, you have one layer of encryption protecting you to do stuff, right? What BSN requires essentially is when you take a piece of data from, say, Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric, and you want to transfer it to the Ethereum network, the BSN adds an additional layer of security on top. Basically, another layer of encryption with another separate key, and now you've got two keys, right? Before that data is transmitted on the other side. So in another way of saying that is you have overlaid security on that. And again, in between, at any point in time, there is not ever sort of unencrypted data. And the only thing the network will see, the BSN network, will see is the fact that there is a transaction that went across, but the details of that transaction would not be open to anyone. So I think it is a pretty well thought out protocol and designed with the right security and trust protocols in mind, such that it should be able to gain the trust of, say, international participants and who understand the technology anyway, right? And to be freely able to do interconnectivity between frameworks, between chains and between cloud service providers.
And I would add that because this is kind of an open innovation approach, and for us in Hong Kong, maybe in the future we will be interested in more value added. So we will be developing some software, for example, that not only we can use, but we can sell it to some other portals in the world, and vice versa. So it's very likely that some other innovative people in Europe or in US, they are operating a local portal, and they will be developing something which could be shared by all the community in this network. So if with this open innovation approach, I'm very confident that a lot of clever people in the world will develop something which make this kind of interchain, this gigantic blockchain network even better. So that's why I have a big confidence in the future of BSN.
So you see, you yourself are involved in sort of, other than just being a portal, but building some kind of like software for the BSN and contributing to it in more than just being an operator. And you see that being the case for other portal operators around the world.
That's one possibility, because this is still evolving, right? Our first stage will be definitely will play a role of a portal, but as we see how we evolve, then if we find some software that could be used by every portal in the world, then we might want to develop something as a very functionality. So and the BSN welcome that when we discussed it, we welcome that, and therefore I think this is a chance for everybody to build on top of it.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Wei Shen. So moving on, another thing that has been very much in the news with regards to Chinese technology is the digital currency electronics payment, DCEP, which is just the digital yuan, the Chinese central bank digital currency. And we have seen a lot of reports on this. It's still not fully rolled out. It's been trialed around the world. So I wanted to ask you guys whether you see the BSN playing a role in the DCP, either being interoperable with it, perhaps helping it become more international. How do you see the two interacting? David, maybe you want to take this question.
Yeah, I think the design of DCP is very interesting, because I think if you look forward in time, in some ways it is an exit from the QE infinity that we're seeing at this moment. We are doing a slow transition to 100% reserve system rather than a fractional reserve system. And the fact that they have actually separated digital currency from electronic payments states very clearly what China is doing. So it's important to understand that the central bank are concentrating on issuing the currency and allowing the business to be innovative in the payment space. And that payment space could be just e-wallet license eventually, and that could be all over the world. It could be in the Belt and Road Initiative. We talk a lot about DCEP, but there's another RCEP, which is very important. Over the weekend, there's a regional comprehensive economic partnership that's signed by 10 countries in Asia and more, including Korea, China, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. And that is a big thing. So BRI plus DCEP plus this RCEP, which actually governs some of the things among the countries in terms of virtual economy, patterns, and so on. I think it would be interesting to see how that is riding on the blockchain infrastructure of BSN and going into the entire growth area. Into ASEAN alone, there are 660 million, right? 50% or more are not connected to formal banking system. Okay, in some countries, they're only 20% connected to broadband. So there's a huge potential for blockchain and distributed communication, the distributed trade, financing, distributed supply chain. I think that's precisely what Asia Pacific needs at this moment. And I can see that how DCP is coming into this and how BRI is going to be part of the equation, and now RCEP. And you have not read what RCEP is, you really have to read it, because that is a big thing, and I think blockchain will be the best digital infrastructure to do that.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else has any comments on DCP and BSN?
Maybe I would add my 2 cents. I would encourage we should think in terms of not only China's DCP, which obviously will go together with the BSN and will be somewhat internationalized. But I will point out there's actually a trial right now in Hong Kong with the Thai government. Actually, my university, Crypto Block, is doing that. And they're trying to study cross-government digital currency, right, from Thailand and from Hong Kong. And therefore, now imagine if a lot of this experiment or trial from different regions in the world are kind of invoking a lot of entrepreneurs to think about that and develop something on BSN. We are encouraging a lot of interesting application to get, on top of the DCEP from different countries. So it's not only from China, which is the obvious suspect, but I would like to think about this really in terms of framework as an open, universal, open source kind of cheap infrastructure, which can allow people to afford them to try a lot of new innovative things, including digital fiat currency.
Mm-hmm. I see. That's really interesting. Thank you, Wei Shen. So we're kind of running low on time right now. So I want to ask you to conclude sort of what is your overall take on the BSN, and if you can identify one key advantage that it has and one key challenge that it will have moving forward to become the sort of global internet of blockchains that we've been talking about. So Michael, maybe you want to kick things off with this question.
Yeah, well, I think the key advantage really is the scale of the adoption that has already occurred, right? It was launched in April 25th of this year. It's about a little less than 6 months ago. And in that time, I would argue it's grown already into one of the largest, if not the largest, and certainly the fastest growing enterprise blockchain ecosystems in the world. And the reason why is because of the massive adoption on the mainland, right? With different city governments, spread into over 120 city nodes. It's already at that scale. And this, BSN as an interoperability framework came at a time where it was almost concurrently launched, really within months of Polkadot and Cosmos also doing their own interoperability launches as well. So, but I think the difference is that those networks, they really still need to prove scaled enterprise adoption on the network, whereas China's side is already established. And because it's interoperable, they are already working with both Polkadot and Cosmos in the ethos of collaboration and trust to provide interconnectivity between their ecosystems. So I think that is a massive advantage for the BSN in that it's already gotten that credibility in terms of being able to do sort of enterprise grades, smart cities, infrastructure type projects, and also the fact that it's not just the interoperability of the cross-chain connectivity, but it's also vertically integrated into the cloud. It's also vertically integrated other frameworks. BSN's recently put smart contracting frameworks on top. It's already basically achieved that sort of critical mass. And we'll have the snowball effect as a lot more of the worldwide technology infrastructure companies want to come to it. So that's I think the plus side. Now, the challenge is, of course, I think mainly is a geopolitical challenge. It's an educational challenge, right? Because I think from the international perspective, because of the current geopolitics and the the sort of bias in the media, this is going to be framed as China chain, and that China is visa and that kind of thing, right? And so it will be a process to educate the world that from a technology standpoint, it has been very thoughtful in constructing this with privacy and security and trust in mind. But that kind of adoption will require a little bit of an uphill proving out. But I think that will be something that is quite rapid as well. I think internationally, BSN's already interacting with a number of the top technology companies, certainly in the blockchain space, but also overall large conglomerates in tech who are very interested in the fact that interoperability becomes a very enabling technology for the development of this new internet blockchains, and BSN has already, I think, established a role in that. So we'll see what happens, but it's certainly going to be an interesting ride going forward.
Thank you, Michael. Wei Shen, what about you? What are your closing remarks?
Well, I think it's an ambitious project. It's innovative, and we talk about the advantage about being a low cost for developers to enjoy the cross-chain, cross-model, cross-framework infrastructure. And now I think the challenge is trying to lie on the road. Well, there are two parts of the challenge. One is the technical interoperability, making all these things really work, right, in a very smooth manner. I think that's a lot of technical work to be done. That's the technical side, but on the business side, I think the portals in the world also have a challenging task to work in their own communities to really get people on board, to really develop things, DApps and all these innovative things on top of the resources. Now, take me as an example. I'm also a adjunct professor in Chinese U and teaching next class. In January will be a fintech entrepreneurship class. I would very much like to make this available to my students and say, hey, this is now a very cheap and affordable way that you can try to do a little bit of innovation, maybe as a homework, maybe as a thesis, right? So, but whether I will be successful to really encourage the people to develop innovative application of that remain to be seen. So that's our future task, I think.
Thank you, Wei Shen. And what about you, David?
Yeah, I think on the advantage side, BSN has got the 4 E's. They're really building up the economy of scales. They can build the economies of scope, economies of integration of different platforms which they're doing, and also doing the economies of convergence of all the technology. So that is an advantage because the interoperability will bring you to the 4 E's beside the LASIK that I talked about earlier. But the challenge will come from, of course, technology side, I think, but that is easy. Well, I would say it's easy to solve. It's challenging, but given time, that will be solved. But the off-chain governance, the regulation, convincing the governments, the incumbents, to see the potential of BSN will be the challenge, because in the short term, they may not see the challenge. And it has been years where even remittances, World Bank is trying to bring it below 6%. They have not been successful, right? So this is something that you are challenging the entire system. You are bringing more people into the economic and financial system. You need to convince the regulators, which I think is a lot easier, but you have to overcome the incumbents as well, because the pressure will come from that. So that, I think, will be the major challenge that we face.
All right, thank you, everyone. I think that's really interesting and sets everything out very well in terms of the technical challenges, the advantage that BSN already has built, but there is still some work to be done, and there is very complicated real world things that that it will be very interesting to watch, such as what regulators will do, how governments might react to it, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much, everyone. I think this has been a great discussion, and hopefully we will continue it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eliza. Pleasure to be here.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.